Ladies and gents, welcome to Suji Reaction. This is why Russia's aircraft carrier killer is a disaster. That's yeah. GA-ASI is leading the double CA revolution, maker of the Predator and Reaper. Okay. Russia has a aircraft carrier killer, obviously implying they can kill USS aircraft carriers. That's what it means, because when it comes to aircraft carrier, USA is the kind of only thing. Yeah, Europe has it, but let's be honest, it's always USA targeted. US has way too many, right? Other countries are like 1, 2, 3. US has like 12, 15 and shit like that. So yeah, I mean, we saw how their flagship ship just like went into smithereen during the Ukrainian war, ongoing war. I'm guessing there is some information came out that this thing isn't that good. Let's see the technicalities behind it and what makes it disaster. This is my channel, Task and Purpose, obviously.
To Russia's massive Kirov-class nuclear-powered battlecruiser that's meant to be capable of firing 174 missiles. Why has this ship been docked since 1997, receiving renovations? And what has $5 billion and 30 years of upgrades made it capable of? I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Let's find out. The story of the Russian Navy's Kirov-class, Admiral Nakhimov, reminds me a little bit of that US Navy's littoral combat ship, because at heart it's really, the story's a tragedy. They were built for one thing, and then they morphed and evolved into something else, and then they never really exactly seemed to nail the landing. One thing seems to be a truism that transcends across time, space, and nation states. Naval procurement is an unholy nightmare of a money pit. Originally, 5 of the Kirov classes were planned to be built back in the 1970s and 80s during the Cold War. When Brezhnev took 1964, the Soviet Navy's ambitions skyrocketed to the moon. A massive shipbuilding program kicked off with the goal of turning the USSR into a true blue water navy. The plan back then was for them to have this nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and a surface fleet capable of at least matching NATO in the Arctic, if not outright just dominating the region by the end of the 1990s is what they wanted. However, sometimes the best laid plans of man don't always go according to plan. But first, I want to talk to you about some fascinating things happening in the world of autonomous fighters. General Atomics Aeronautical Systems has been working with the United States Air Force for years to develop AI and machine learning for their Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or CCA. Everything General Atomics has done for the past 30 years has been about it.
Yeah, so that's what the description was. I just thought it's description about Russia's aircraft carrier. But no, it's this. That makes sense. Reaper, Predator.
Advancing the collaborative efficiency of human-machine teams. It's been an evolution from line-of-sight controls to long-distance satellite relays, adding automated processes such as automatic takeoff and landing, remote taxi, and other systems, all to protect warfighters. Over the past few years, General Atomics has developed the software and hardware crucial for CCA.
Are you kidding me? Why is Task and Purpose is the only channel where like military companies and contractors are putting out ads? Like Task and Purpose is that big? Like I've never seen any other channel where like General whatever this, right? Like makers of Predator and Reaper. This is the new thing we are making. Here's an ad in like Task and Purpose. I don't know. I'm guessing Task and Purpose has a specific audience that's very military heavy, so they can do that. I don't know.
Cycling lessons learned from the field right back
General
into
Atomics.
the design process. No one else brings these strengths to the new paradigm needed for CCA. You're going to be hearing a lot more about this soon, because the Air Force says that the next aircraft in the CCA effort, which it has designated the YFQ-42A, is going to take flight later this year. Our thanks to General Atomics Aeronautical Systems for sponsoring this episode. They had the political buy-in, they had the resources necessary to build that massive fleet, but the hard part is actually figuring out how to put pen to paper on that kind of massive naval project. Project Orlan cruisers were originally supposed to be a roughly 8,600 ton ship, but it morphed into a 28,000 ton battle cruiser. It sticks out 16 stories above the water. It can carry 700 sailors. That's like my entire graduating class of high school on this ship. It has 3 helicopters because
it all whenever somebody tell like, okay, this has like 20 knot speed, 40 knot speed, it's like, what is that translate like? I don't know, like what is it, 20, 30, 40 kilometers, some shit like that, right? It's like, oh, look at the ship is slow. It's 28,000 tons. It's surprising to me that even it moves even at that speed. That's insane.
Your initial role was as...
I'm not just talking about this, but any ship in general, right? People talk about ships and their speed. They don't really take into account like how gigantic the fucking ship is.
Anti-NATO submarine hunters. Its sheer scale was meant to strike fear into the hearts of any nation that dared cross their flagship vessel. Of the 4 Kirov-class that were actually built, 2 were retired in the 1990s due to the lack of funding thanks to the Soviets' collapse. Those are currently in the middle of being scrapped for spare parts, and the last one constructed, Peter the Great, the Kirov-class one, is only one that's left that's fully mission capable. And that leaves us with the last one, the one that we're focused on for this video, the Nakhimov. It's been in dock and been upgraded since the 1990s. But here's where we start to run into some of the problems. Since the dream of having those nuke-powered aircraft carriers was never realized, the Kirov class today makes a lot less sense, especially since only one of them is operational. One of the other ones suffered a malfunction in 2004, and it was a whole hullabaloo. One Russian admiral said this about the Kirov that malfunctioned. He said, quote, "The ship is in such a state that it could explode at any moment," end quote. Other Russian officials admitted that while the reactor did need some work,
this is one of those things when people have a pistol, basic pistol, I don't know, like, I don't want to say basic, but pistol, 32 pistol or something in their house. Okay, and just have 3 bullets or some shit. Like, why do you have that? It's a deterrent, isn't it? I mean, you don't have infrastructure because you never did that. You never did like nuclear power, aircraft carrier, all that. So you don't have like structure for this. You just only have this one ship. Why keep it? I don't know. I guess it's a threat. Maybe if some scenario where US aircraft carrier is near Russia, they can say we have an aircraft carrier killer. That's it. In practice, is this going to work? Obviously not. But that's the thing. In modern world, intelligence is everything. US has this intelligence. Like, US is not going to be afraid of this. So what's the point of this? That's what I'm thinking. Maybe like scare off smaller countries? I don't know.
Is no more a danger than all the others, with them stating, quote, "You can say that any ship is capable of exploding at any time." That's an actual quote. It's like the RMK reactor meme in real life. In theory, it's stocked to the teeth with air defense systems in case enemy aircraft from those aircraft carriers attack it. There's a ton of S-300 and S-400 missiles on board for intercepting those NATO aircraft. It's supposed to be a defensive air defense bubble floating around against NATO aircraft. It's meant to swat down incoming jets and then launch off its long-range missiles at the American aircraft carrier from far away with even more volume. Instead of trying to build a massive fleet of aircraft carrier groups, Russia decided it'd be easier to build ships that are designed to blow up aircraft carriers. That's the huge difference in doctrine, in theory, and in mindset. What exactly is a battle?
It's not that simple. So is it like Russia, whenever they have a war, they usually have some land connected to it. Russia touches fucking everything. China, North Korea, entire Europe, even Alaska, why not? Like, it's basically just there, right? I mean, it doesn't touch Alaska with land, but it's like barely small gap, right? So usually when it comes to navy power, Russia never had to care about that much. Russia/Soviet Union, whatever. But USA is different. USA borders Mexico and Canada, like not much of threat there. So whatever USA have to do is like have to do overseas. So they have to have the strongest navy in the world. It's like how Britain, worked for centuries. British Empire. Why British Empire? Because they had the strongest navy. USA have to work like that. So Russia doesn't need aircraft carriers like that, while USA obviously does. So it's like different doctrine that way.
Cruiser. Yelling "you sunk my battle cruiser" doesn't have the same ring as "you sunk my battleship." It sounds weird. and it is. This is a little bit of semantics. The definition can vary, but usually a battleship is larger and slower moving than your battle cruiser. This might be more easier to compare to like the CGN in the US Navy. Ultimately, those CGN American nuclear powered cruisers proved to be too costly to maintain, so they were retired between 1993 and 1999, and we'll get into how that relates to this as well in a minute. Technically, and I love to get technically, the Russians classify them as heavy nuclear missile cruisers. In fact, these Kirov were a huge reason why the US Navy brought back their old Iowa-class battleships from the 1970s for a bit. They were a quick way to counter the Russian battlecruiser without having to build brand new ships of their own. In 1959, there was a proposal to convert the Iowa-class into a missile-armed battleship, believe it or not, that would have seen its guns removed from the deck and like 16 Polaris VLS launch tubes replacing it. That is cursed as f***. I've seen a ton of YouTube videos on cursed guns. There are not enough cursed naval ship videos out there. The last major deployment that the Nakhimov saw was back in 1991 during a patrol mission in the Mediterranean. So there's some historical precedent for it to be over there. Afterwards, funding for upkeep was hard to come by, and it rarely left port. Between 2006 and 2012, the Nakhimov, Admiral Nakhimov, she sat in port, and they toyed with different ideas for overhauling her capabilities. Work on the ship resumed in 2014, but budget delays and new capability requirements pushed it to where we are today, still sitting in a maintenance bay. Well, currently it's sitting in the Sevmash shipyard, which is way up north near Finland and Sweden. This shipyard is best known for being Russia's only producer of nuclear submarines, which is why the nuclear-powered cruiser was sent there for this refit. But is this Russian battlecruiser ever gonna really...
Isn't that risky when it comes to like, oh, this is the only place where they make nuclear stuff, or this is the only one that they have? Like if USL, I mean, it's not gonna happen, but if like let's just say some kind of war happens, strategically people know where to strike to just like completely disable that area, the whole infrastructure. Don't you want to diversify, or is it like Russia only give out the information like this is the only one, but maybe they have somewhere else like nobody knows about it, because Russia is big, right? And I highly doubt Russia is one of those people, one of those type of people who just like doesn't do things secretly, right? So people don't realize like which is where, because it would be really dangerous. Oh, this is the only place where we make it. Like, okay,
be ready to deploy. In February 2025, a Russian defense insider told Russian media outlets that the Nakhimov's dual nuclear reactors were launched, quote unquote, which I'm hoping was just a bad translation, because I don't want to hear anything is launched having to do with anything nuclear. The report goes on to state that by summer of 2025, we can expect to see it back out on the water again for tests, a first since 1999. But Russia says that they've almost got it figured out after the new upgrades that they're putting on it. So what kind of upgrades is it getting? Of those 174 missile launch tubes that we talked about, 80 were going to be specifically for different cruise missiles, one of them being the new upgraded hypersonic 3M22 Zikron with a 600-pound warhead, with a top speed of Mach 9 and a reported range of 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles. This outclasses that old Soviet-era P-700, which only had a range of 370 miles, although its warhead was much bigger at like 750 kilograms or 1,650 pounds. The Admiral Nakhimov is one of the only two remaining Kirov-class battlecruisers. This is the type of gigantic ship that we only see uniquely in the Russian Navy. They're the largest non-aircraft carrier ships in any navy in the world. These sea beasts are the only nuclear-powered ships designed for combat that aren't aircraft carriers or submarines. This essentially gives them unlimited endurance to go as far as they want forever, as long as they're kept resupplied with food and ammo, of course. By contrast, the US Navy only has submarines and aircraft carriers that are nuclear powered. The Nakhimov was basically a delivery system for your P-700 missile. Its whole purpose in life was to be giant and carry an offensive amount of missiles.
That is kind of a unique in its own way, isn't it? Like we have a proper attack ship with missile launchers, which is nuclear powered. Like I don't know how it falls in the spectrum of like flex, but I guess it's some of it, right? Like US only has like submarine and like aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers can attack too, but not missiles. Like with the planes and shit, planes have missiles, sure. Submarines are attacked, but it's like submarines, they're their own thing. This is the only battle type ship with missiles on it that has nuclear power. Okay. I guess in the end of the day, tactics matters more than anything. This is on paper a flag, sure.
Nuclear infinity amount of time. But why does only Russia have this type of ship with this kind of strategy? The answer to that rabbit hole explains the fundamental difference between what the Russian and US Navy prioritize. The US Navy is built around carrier battle groups. The American strategy has long been centered on power projection, meaning it wants the ability to rapidly deploy forces anywhere in the world to maintain that dominance. However, in contrast, the Russian Navy has historically been more focused on sea denial rather than sea control. This means their ships are designed to make operating in their territorial waters and the surrounding areas as difficult as humanly possible for the enemy navy, rather than them trying to project power across the globe as much. It's like my old squad leader used to always say, the best defense is a good defense. Its other purpose was my favorite naval doctrine, gunboat diplomacy. What is gunboat diplomacy? It's when you use your naval power and the implicit threat of force to achieve political or diplomatic goals. You could also call it sea extortion or floating ultimatums. The Russian Kirov-class, with its gigantic size, was likely built for gunboat diplomatic purposes. But for a dummy ground pounder like me, what does flagship mean? I've usually only heard that in the context of my uncle saying that his used car dealership in Port Jefferson is his flagship store. But in the context of the Navy, it means the lead ship in a fleet or formation, usually the most...
I like how people like misuses the word flagship all the time. Flagship makes sense when you have a group of things and one thing is like the ultimate best one. And it's not even about the best one, it's about the main one. In company terms, when a company puts all their chips into one specific product and everything else is around it, the specific product is a flagship. That's what usually in like like ship terms, the ship that carries the flag is the command center, right? That's where the captain and everybody, like commander and everybody is. That's what flagship is. Flagship doesn't necessarily mean the best of the best. It's just a flagship. Right? So in product, like you can have the extreme version of some product, but that's not really flagship. That's just like a special extreme version of it. In shop terms, how is it like, oh, this is my flagship shop? How does that work? Your collection of shop that is just yours? How is that your flagship shop?
Powerful, advanced, or prestigious vessel. The term originates from the naval tradition from the 16th and 18th century, where a fleet commander would sail on the ship that very literally carried the flag, which signaled their authority. Okay, let's assume it works out and it's pressed into service eventually. Where would it go? The Arctic zone of the Russian Federation. This zone contains huge reserve of oil, natural gas, rare earth minerals, and it's a major
Yeah, I love that globe scale, globe type at least. Even though this is not globe, but it's taken that way, right? It just shows you like how things shift. Even this is not accurate because it's not actual globe, but accurate enough. Like Arctic Ocean and everything, right? How Alaska bends from Canada, how Russia joins it, right? Russia in like normal 2D map, this Russia is like completely straight, just touching Alaska. Canada is like like smaller and all that shit. Some places is like this area looks gigantic in 2D map, even though it's very smaller. Yeah, you want to see a proper scale, just see a globe. Like 2D maps are not accurate.
Huge reserve of oil, natural gas, rare earth minerals, and it's a major shipping zone for Russia's economy. With the addition of Finland and Sweden into NATO, it's a really sensitive location recently if you look at it on a map. With Russia's modern naval deployments being stretched thin, the Admiral Nakhimov, I think, would likely be deployed in one of three key strategic zones once it's fully operational, hypothetically: the Arctic, the Pacific, or the Mediterranean. To me, the Arctic seems like the prime candidate due to its increasing militarization through many different countries up there. Russia has been doubling down on creating ice.
Russia's kind of dominant in Arctic, so that makes sense. Pacific is just like, I don't know about that. I don't know about Pacific. Arctic, I think, is going to be
breaking ships for here. And we've recently started to see signals from the United States government that they're interested in what happens in the Arctic region more. You might remember that the US government started saying that they might want to acquire Greenland. And one of the main stated reasons for that is because Greenland's location.
I like how Trump's like, yeah, okay, Zelensky, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Putin respects me. Like, okay, this is not how we do all this deal and shit. And then Trump's like, I'm gonna buy Greenland. And Putin's like, oh, that's an act of war. Trump's like, what? You gonna do that to me? I don't know what the dynamic happening there, but that's just hilarious.
Is important to military defense operations. The US already has and maintains a base there, which serves as a critical early warning system for missile defense, but there's also a lot of economic interest when it comes to resources here, so Russia, the US, and even China are signaling interest in this watery region more than ever before. If Russia deployed this Kirov-class to the Pacific, it could help them contest the waters near China, North Korea, and Japan. Personally, I think this would be less...
I can't. People are thinking like Taiwan might be the reason where what if Greenland is the reason where Russia, China, USA all have the war? That would be stupidest of all time. Strategically, okay, maybe, but that would be stupidest of all time. Like Greenland, really, this is why we're fighting? Even Trump said like, okay, military is not off the table when it comes to Greenland. Like, what does that mean? You're gonna fight Denmark or something? What is gonna happen?
Likely of an option. The Mediterranean and Middle East remain strategically significant. It'd be crazy to see one of these massive Kirov classes floating around Africa. It looks like Russia may be withdrawing from their naval base in Tartus, Syria, but they just gained a new port in Sudan in Africa. So could we see the Admiral Nakhimov there? It's true, the Russian Black Sea Fleet has taken a beating.
I don't think it's gonna be there, right? Because that's like that strait is like really important when it comes to like business, so USA will have a problem with that. I don't think I don't feel like it's gonna be there. I don't know. That would be a bold thing if they just put it there, right? I don't know.
Against Ukraine recently, but they're still making new moves. They're still trying to get those ports in Sudan, and getting there is easier when you're nuclear powered. The Admiral doesn't have to worry about refueling for literal years, but this does come at a trade-off of money, the dollar bill. It's expensive to run 2 nuclear reactors. The upside to an expensive nuclear reactor for the Admiral, though, is it's essentially got that unlimited infinity power. If needed, the battlecruiser would be able to sustain its top speed of 32 knots while weapons maxing with all of its missiles. So it's something worth keeping an eye on. But it's interesting to note that the most...
And nuclear power is insane, isn't it? Like, people will need to like... I think nuclear power can be cheap if everybody just say, fuck it, let's go nuclear. But people don't want to do that, right? We have alternative sources which is like really reliant and doesn't have that much pollution to it. Yeah, it has problems. Yeah, we have to figure shit out, but that's what our engineers are for, right? Whatever problem we have right now with the electric, coal, and all that shit, nuclear power is like insane, especially when it comes to like logistics and things, right? You don't have to worry about refueling that much. That's one of the main key points.
The most easily comparable units that the US Navy had were just they were decommissioned because they were too expensive. Is the juice worth the Russian squeeze? That's what I think it comes down to. I'm your average infantryman.
Yeah, there you go. This is interesting, man. I would love to see where this goes, just for technical standpoint, right? And I think in the future, nuclear powered ships are going to become like common in a way. Somebody has to like make an initiative like, oh, we have to go nuclear now, power wise, right? Somebody have to do that, right? I know there's like way too many elements around it. That is a problem, right? Like how to do it, right? Which way to do it. NASA was running with a plutonium problem recently because we're not making any more nuclear bombs and shit. There's many elements around it, but we can figure shit out. That's the thing. We can do it. Of course, it's going to have issues. Nothing's free. But issues will be like very small compared to all the like things we'll get. I don't know. But yeah, right, well, that was why Russia's aircraft carrier killer is disaster by channel task and purpose. If you like my next subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time.